everyone who's attending. So, thank you once again for joining us today, and we sincerely hope that this will be of value to you. I'll quickly introduce myself. I am Nisha, and I work with the CII-Godrej Green Business Center in Hyderabad. And we have two panelists with us today. Hugo works with the International Energy Agency, and he's joining us from Paris today. Hugo has a lot of experience in industrial energy efficiency. He has worked in the past with SMEs as well as large plants on a variety of activities, including audits, ISO 50001 systems, assisting in financing, and so on. He is currently managing IEA's Energy Efficiency in Emerging Economies program. This is on industrial energy efficiency. He will, of course, be talking a little bit about some of these experiences later on during his presentation. Hugo has two master's degrees. The first is in engineering and energy and environment from France, and the second is in environmental science and engineering from China. Hugo, thank you very much for joining us today, taking our time and being with us today. I will request you to speak in a little while. Of course, from CII's end, we have with us Kiran Ananth. Some of you may already know him, may have already interacted with him. Kiran has about 20 years of experience in energy efficiency in industry, particularly in India, and he's an expert on multiple sectors, and he has a lot of experience with Indian industry and technologies and processes. And Kiran will also be taking us through some of the key levers for energy efficiency in India today. So without any further ado, I will now request Kiran to take over and make his presentation. Kiran, I'm handing it over to you.
Thanks, Nisha, and good afternoon, everyone. Just share my presentation with you.
I would just like to interrupt to say that we will take questions at the end of both the presentations, and participants can please put in their questions in the Q&A window that all of you should see on the right-hand side of your screen. If you don't see it, you can press the three dots at the bottom of your screen to see the Q&A window. Please put in your questions there, and we'll take them at the end of the session. Thanks, Kiran. Thanks, everyone, and Kiran, over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon again, and thanks for joining today. I'd like to speak to you about some of the voluntary actions we think industry can look at in industrial energy efficiency in general, but particularly in the current scenario, accelerating energy efficiency initiatives in the country post the current lockdown that most of the industries right now are already in or just getting back to business. So the outline of my presentation today is looking at policy and regulations, a brief overview on its evolution and impact, and more particularly on the role of voluntary actions that industry can look at beyond what is mandatory and what is driven by policy. A quick overview on what we think are the impacts of the current lockdown due to COVID-19, and some of the key levers that we think can help all stakeholders in the energy efficiency drive in the country to look at something which we could all be a part of technology roadmaps or benchmarking or on innovation, on implementing certain energy efficiency initiatives in some innovative models, and moving towards digitalization and adopting the digital way of life in a big way. So just as a quick overview and a prelude to the discussions that we are having today, India is already one of the largest energy consumers globally, and the trend is expected to continue. Various reports indicate that in the next 20 years, the country's energy consumption, the primary energy consumption, is expected to double from over about 800 million tons of oil equivalent currently to about 1900 million tons of oil equivalent by 2040. This also means several things. One, there would be a huge dependence on the imports. Second, there is a huge dependence on the energy requirements for development of a country. And having said that, by 2040, it is estimated that India will consume more than 10% of the global consumption at that point in time, which makes it one of the largest energy consuming nations then. With this current trend, the focus definitely shifts on energy efficiency, not only for energy security, not only for the larger interest of the greenhouse gas emission reduction, but more primarily from industry's competitiveness point of view, because such a large increase in energy is also foreseen with a significant increase in costs of such energy sources. So that's another factor that industry will have to be cognizant of, that this will not only have a challenge on security, but also on the competitiveness in the global markets today. So having said that, there are several key initiatives being taken both at a policy level, and there are several voluntary actions that are currently underway. So the discussion today is on looking at what policy initiatives are happening and what is in store for all of us in the years ahead, and what voluntary actions can industry pursue as far as improving their energy efficiency substantially is concerned. So we tried to put together the various policy initiatives that have happened in the country maybe for the last 60 years, say from 1960 onwards, when the need for energy efficiency was felt. The first Energy Survey of India committee was formed in 1963. A fuel policy committee was formed in 1970, and that was primarily when the world was going through the first oil shock in 1970s, and a lot of initiatives that happened at that time was was primarily focusing on the fuel efficiency improvements, be it the fuel efficiency services by NPC or the establishment of a working group on energy policy, establishment of Petroleum Conservation Research Association. All these initiatives were primarily looked at in terms of addressing the oil shock scenario. Then there were a whole lot of initiatives that happened post 1980. There were several initiatives in terms of accelerated depreciation on energy efficiency products. The Ministry of Power was formed in 1985. The Energy Conservation Bill, in a very draft stage of what we see today, was launched way back in 1988. Then there was an energy conservation equipment finance scheme. We all talk about financing, and we are looking at a variety of interventions that are possible. The first energy conservation equipment finance scheme came up in 1988, along with an energy audit subsidy scheme, and several other programs that happened during that time. And as far as energy efficiency movement in the country was concerned, one of the landmark moves was the Energy Conservation Act, which came up in 2001. Probably one of the first few countries globally to make energy conservation a mandatory affair, something where energy efficiency is determined mandatorily and not left voluntary like in most other nations even today. The formation of BE, Bureau of Energy Efficiency, was an outcome of the Energy Conservation Act, because the Act wanted a bureau to be established to implement, guide, and monitor the energy efficiency implementation in the country. The first energy auditor and energy manager exam happened in 2004, and subsequently several other initiatives happened. And finally, in 2008, the Government of India came up with the National Action Plan on Climate Change, the NAPCC as it is called. And one of the major missions in that was NMEEE, the National Mission on Enhanced Energy Efficiency. And all that we see in the next 10 to 12 years were an outcome of the NMEEE programs. The NMEEE, from that perspective, was quite a big landmark. In each 1 or 2 decades, we see one such landmark move that significantly transforms the way several other initiatives happen in the country beyond that. Whether it is a Budget Lamp Yojana or the rolling out of PAT cycles, the PAT cycle 1 that came up in 2012, and the current PAT cycle that we see is PAT cycle 5. For those of you who don't know, PAT is Perform, Achieve and Trade. It is a mandatory program under Ministry of Power for the designated consumers. the units covered under these are required to reduce their energy consumption within a time frame of 3 years. Either they reduce or they buy energy saving certificates from other units which have exceeded their targets within this time frame. One of the excellent programs, one of the first of its kind energy efficiency program globally. We are right now in the PAT cycle 5, and I'll also talk about a significant improvement that each of these PAT cycles has brought in as far as energy efficiency is concerned. Then again, several other initiatives like the Ujala program or the energy conservation building codes, the National Action Plan, National Cooling Plan, variety of programs that have happened in between till the current phase that we are at as far as the PAT cycle 5 is concerned. Now, if somebody is looking at the trend of energy consumption and the
Kiran? Sorry, everyone. I think Kiran is having a bandwidth issue. He should be back with us in a couple of seconds. Kiran, we're not able to hear you. No. Okay, we see you. Your screen is slowly coming back.
Okay, is it good now?
Yes, but I think we might have missed a little bit at the end of the previous slide.
All right. So I was just talking about the trend of increase in the primary energy consumption over the last 50 years, and while we see a significant increase in the primary energy consumption trend, we also see a steep reduction in the green line that you see on the screen, which is the energy intensity per unit of GDP, measured in terms of ton of oil equivalent per unit of per dollar. So there has been a significant reduction over the last 50 years, which talks about the energy intensity of the country. In terms of key takeaways, or as a summary of what we heard so far, the energy intensity per unit of GDP has reduced by more than 50% since 1990. It was about 0.4 kilogram of oil equivalent per USD in 1990, and in 2017, it is about 0.2 kg of oil equivalent per dollar of revenue. This is from the Economic Survey of India. So it primarily means that the energy intensity improvement across the country has been at a rate of about 2.5% annually. Then there were several initiatives of Bureau of Energy Efficiency and the Energy Efficiency Services Limited. Combined together, I think the overall impact is estimated to be around 15% of avoided energy use. And in terms of emission, it is around 300 million tons of avoided carbon emission during this period. Both of them are substantially large numbers within a time span of about 18 years. This significantly has made an impact as far as the energy intensity and the avoided energy consumption in the country is concerned. In terms of opportunities for India as a country, of course, the Paris Agreement is now in place. The target is to reduce GHG intensity per unit of GDP by about 33 to 35% by 2030. And among all the levers that we see in India's plan for GHG intensity reduction, energy efficiency is one of the key levers, and therefore more activities and initiatives are expected beyond what we see right now. We are all aware of the SDG goals, the Sustainable Development Goals. One of the key goals pertaining to energy and energy efficiency has been goal number 7, which also has a target of doubling the improvement in energy efficiency within the span of next 10 years. So by the 2030 agenda of the SDG goals, The target is to double the energy efficiency impact that countries can look at. Now, it was almost at the same time that recently we had the Bureau of Energy Efficiency under Ministry of Power release a very insightful document and a roadmap called Unnati. Unnati stands for Unlocking National Energy Efficiency Potential. This lays a very clear time frame for the next 12 years in terms of what are the areas where India will look at, what are the areas where improvements are expected to happen, and what kind of impact is expected within the next 12 years as far as energy efficiency journey in the country is concerned. While it does look at some of the existing and ongoing initiatives, be it on energy efficient home appliances or in terms of the PAT program, in terms of the future scenario, this document also clearly lays out the need to adopt some of the next generation practices, be it Industry 4.2, be it looking at stringent fuel efficiency norms, operating virtual power plants, operating out of net zero energy buildings, and even looking at artificial intelligence in industrial process management. I think the overall outlook and the purview of the government of India has been clearly laid out in this document, which gives a clear roadmap for the future energy efficiency initiatives. Not stopping there, it also estimates what impact these initiatives can create, and the impact is quite huge. The total energy saving potential is estimated to be about 87 million tons of oil equivalent. The emission intensity is expected to reduce by 36% by 2030, as opposed to the NDC targets of 33 to 35%. Looks like we would surpass the targets that have been set by 2030 by these interventions and measures. And the total energy efficiency investment potential is also pegged to be around 8.4 lakh crores by 2021. Another huge market opportunity as far as energy efficiency investments are concerned. While this looks at the scenario and the future outlay, I think the current pandemic that we are witnessing has had an impact on the energy and industry in the country. For example, the power consumption in April 2020 has reduced by about 22% as compared to what it was the same month in 2019. India's fuel demand fell by over 50% in the month of April. Coal shipments from Coal India fell by over 25% in the month of April. These are all some significant numbers which look at the sharp fall in the energy consumption, largely because of the industrial lockdown that we have witnessed over the last 2 months. One of the reasons, as we see here, is the industrial production shrinking by over 16% during this month, and therefore there is a significant reduction in demand as well as a reduction in supply, and therefore a significant reduction in the energy consumption. And among all this, the MSMEs seem to have been the most affected. So what do we anticipate as an impact on this? Definitely in the large industries, and more particular in the small and medium enterprises, we see cash flow challenges coming up. Obviously, with the cash flow challenges coming in, priority would be on certain key business continuity measures, ensuring their material supply chain, ensuring their product dispatches. We do not know how much of priority might be there in terms of energy efficiency investments. So that is something which we should look at. Future technology intervention, probably this is the right time to get in the future technology, but financing becomes a challenge. So we should look at how the future technology intervention can be looked at in the current situation, and what kind of financing measures can be looked at. Attractiveness of projects. See, energy efficiency projects primarily depend on its attractiveness for two factors. One is the cost of energy. Second is the overall operating hours of the equipment. In the current scenario, both the operating hours of the equipment or the plant and the cost of energy is something that should be evaluated. So this is again something that should be looked at in terms of what impact it might have in making certain energy efficiency projects more attractive. Workforce, we are all witnessing a significant movement of workforce across the country. So we do not know how much of skilled workforce would still be retained by organizations post lockdown, and among a few other issues that they might face. So the current scenario we see poses us two unique opportunities. One opportunity to get the policies and programs targeted around energy efficiency in place. Probably this is the right time where we look at either stimulus packages or incentives or attractive financing schemes that makes energy efficiency more attractive, and the uptake becomes far better. And second, probably this is the time where industry can also look at how voluntary initiatives can play complementary role to the government-led initiatives. There are several voluntary mechanisms available, voluntary initiatives available. So the opportunity that lies for industry now is to look at what kind of measures can be taken up in terms of enhancing their efficiency through these voluntary measures, as well as complementing the state-led measures in this current period. So in terms of voluntary initiatives, see, for example, we looked at two organizations, Organization A and B. Organization A definitely reduces its specific energy consumption over the next 10 years, looking at the regulation, looking at the scenario, looking at the targets that are there, and does achieve a significant reduction. But at the same time, if there is another organization called Organization B, which moves alongside the regulation, but also pursues several other voluntary initiatives, I think the gap that we see between A and B would largely be attributed to the impact of voluntary action. So what we mean by voluntary action here is the initiatives that industries can take beyond what is required, what is mandated, what is regulated. And I think this definitely has a substantial leverage for action, substantial opportunity for improvement. And I think while the mandatory initiatives can take us so far, the voluntary initiatives going beyond this can take industry to world-class levels of performance. So what we call it as a push and a pull strategy, both working together or both complementing each other, can actually help the industry move towards excellence. Now, there are several voluntary initiatives existing both nationally and globally, be it programs or systems for recognition or benchmarking or roadmaps. I think we have several opportunities where industries can participate, industries can sign up, industries can take either medium-term or long-term goals or very ambitious goals, be it programs like EP100 and RE100, which encourages industries to take ambitious goals, be it systems and recognition programs like the ISO 50001 on energy management standards, or the Greenco program, or the Z program. Benchmarking is another excellent tool. I'll talk about benchmark and roadmaps in a couple of slides, but benchmarking, there are several benchmarks available both nationally and globally, and it is up to companies to look at what kind of tools and benchmarks are available to look at where they are and where they can go. And roadmaps, I mean, these are at sectoral level excellent tools for guiding the sector, for guiding action, and for helping business leaders take decisions as far as their sector is concerned. In terms of leveraging voluntary initiatives for accelerating energy efficiency, I wanted to briefly touch upon these 6 levers today. One was in terms of technology roadmaps, how these roadmaps are helping certain sectors move significantly forward, and how an opportunity exists for several other sectors to look at. Benchmarking, as I mentioned, is an excellent tool for improvement both at a macro as well as at a micro level. So what can industries do in terms of leveraging that? Digitalization seems to be the way of life, seems to be the way energy efficiency initiatives are moving. So what can units, both large and small, look at transforming their operations more the digital way? Innovation, I think we have several innovators in the country coming up with variety of measures, actions, and plan for innovation. There are several platforms available to leverage that better. So, I mean, now it's up to the industry to look at how they could leverage these existing platforms and become better. Innovative implementation models are coming, particularly in terms of both technology and financing innovative models. So we could look at some of these as well. And lastly, on what kind of energy efficiency financing is required. what is the quantum of financing we are looking at, and what kind of models can we look at. Technology roadmaps are an excellent guiding tool. I mean, these are tools which will help industries look at onboarding new technologies, look at what kind of short-term, medium, and long-term planning is required for the sector, and as well as what kind of interventions are required to look at a significant uptake as far as the energy efficiency movement in these sectors are concerned. Uh, I think one of the standing examples that we see in the country today is the cement technology roadmap, which the WBCSD and IEA jointly had developed for the Indian cement sector. The overall target for this, which the sector voluntarily took, was a 45% reduction on their greenhouse gas emission intensity by 2050 as against the 2010 levels. A group of industry heads came forward, signed on this document to say that this is our voluntary roadmap. These are the measures that we will take. These are the technology solutions that we are looking at. And this is the anticipated reach that we expect to achieve. So there were several levers that, just as a quick summary of what is there in this roadmap, several levers were identified in terms of achieving a deep reduction in their emission intensity. Pilot studies were carried out in over 7 units across the country. These pilot studies were to put the identified levers into action. So the intention behind these pilot studies was to look at if all these levers were implemented in a given plant, are we achieving the reduction that was anticipated? And there was a significant reduction that was achieved, significant impact that was measured, and the industry can move towards achieving its target if these measures were implemented in a given unit. Not stopping there, the sector also came forward and said it has been about 5 years since the roadmap had come. They wanted to look at where they are as far as the implementation of roadmap was concerned. In most of the levers that were identified, the industry was on track or ahead of track. In about 7 years time frame between 2010 and 2017, 5% of GHG intensity reduction was already achieved by the sector. It is in line with what was anticipated. It was in line with the interim targets that the sector had taken on. So, I mean, one is to develop a roadmap. Second is to see how the sector is progressing. And from that perspective, this sector in the country has done exceedingly well. From our perspective, we see roadmaps can certainly help sectors undergo a significant transition, move towards world-class energy efficiency levels, as CII calls it. There are several sectors where we see such similar opportunity exists. It can be in aluminium, it can be in iron and steel, it can be in pulp and paper. All the energy-intensive sectors can start looking at what kind of roadmap they can pursue, what kind of deep reduction targets they can take up, what are the levers that will help them get there, and what kind of technologies are required to help the industry achieve these kind of targets. Benchmarking is the next lever that I wanted to speak about. Benchmarking is one of the tools that is, in our opinion, less leveraged compared to the potential that it can offer. This of course, benchmarking is a practice of comparing processes and performance metrics to industry best and best standards. While having said that, this also helps industry highlight several hidden opportunities, drives more faster action, targeted improvement is possible, and comparison can lead to improvement. Now, this benchmarking can happen at various levels. It can happen at sector level, a subsector level, at a unit level, or even at a process level, at a section level, and even at an equipment level. I think the extent to which benchmarking can be done can be as deep as it could be. And as you see from the pyramid, the lower you go in the pyramid, the more would be the quantity of data required. While at a sector level benchmarking, the amount of data that is required could be more of a top-down approach. But if some of the sectors are able to get into a section level or an equipment level benchmarking, while the quantity of data that is required can be large, the data integration or rolling out this equipment or section level data to a sector level can be extremely insightful as far as improvement opportunities are concerned. And this can also result in several actionable points at a facility level to start looking at where improvements are possible. Now, there are several benchmarks available. We have several sectoral benchmarks available, both from IEA, the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, World Steel Association, World Aluminium, Solomon Associates, each of them coming up with certain sector benchmark studies. There are several process level benchmarking also available. Cement is a sector which has done extensively well on benchmarking. A lot of data is available for units to look at. While we are aware of some other sectors which are undertaking a similar exercise, thermal power plants are undertaking a similar exercise on sectional and equipment level benchmarking. Iron and steel, while globally there is a lot of data available with World Steel, there is a serious effort that is currently happening on the iron and steel in India to get into the process level and equipment level benchmarking. Pulp and paper, dairy, several other sectors can take advantage of these benchmarks. Now, there are several sectors where their operations are unique, their operations are not comparable. For example, pharmaceutical units or chemical units. These are organizations which can start looking at equipment level benchmarking. For example, what is the kilowatt per ton of refrigeration that your chillers are operating at? What is the kilowatt per CFM of compressor that your organization is operating vis-a-vis another similar organization which is having similar requirements and processes? So this equipment level benchmarking is again an important tool which is picking up, and the amount of detailing somebody can go to and the kind of improvement opportunities they can identify is quite large. Now, the CII's Energy Award for Excellence in Energy Management focuses substantially on benchmarking, and we have seen these benefits. 45% of weightage for the companies applying for CII's Energy Award focus is laid on benchmarking, and we see this giving a significant impact on industries. As you can see in the bar graph on your left, even some of the best performing plants, the most efficient plants in the country, are able to reduce anywhere between 1.5 to 5.5% within a span of 5 years by looking at benchmarks, by taking specific targeted actions on benchmarking and its improvement. The benchmark numbers are available. So as you can see on the right side, there are several sectors where we know what is the best number that is available in each sector, what is the best plant which is operating in each of these sectors, what kind of numbers they have achieved. And you can also break this down into further subcategorization to look at what led to these numbers possible in these units. So benchmarking we see is an effective tool. It can significantly give insights into gap analysis, into actions on targeted improvements. At a macro level, this can be a very, very good, this can help build long-term strategy for improvement. At the process level, this can give very, very specific actions that are required as far as improvements are concerned. Now, the third area I wanted to cover was on innovation. I think innovation has always been the need of the hour. It is even more an essential need of the hour now. There are several innovative solutions, innovative models, innovative technologies coming to the forefront. And there are also several platforms which are available where innovations can be tapped, innovations can be leveraged on. This can be either in terms of technology or platforms which help matchmake, platforms which are helping in forging partnerships and coming up with innovative implementation models. Just so you all know, there is one interesting program which is run by UNIT and Bureau of Energy Efficiency called Facility for Low Carbon Technology Deployment. This innovation challenge is currently focusing on 3 verticals: waste heat recovery, pumps, and space conditioning, with a couple of more verticals getting added this year on automation and resource efficiency. The target for each of these innovations is to demonstrate their first pilot in the industry. In the last 2 years of this program, more than 30 technologies have been selected. It is not only helping the industry's pilot, but also providing financial support up to about $50,000 for each of the selected technologies. Apart from this, mentoring support from an expert panel is provided. And what we see is many of these technologies that are getting implemented from this program are first of its kind in the country, and in some cases first of its kind globally. For example, this platform has facilitated the implementation of a waste heat recovery from kiln shell, probably first of its kind globally. I mean, no other cement kiln that we are aware of has had waste heat recovery from the kiln shell. So this implementation is currently underway. Waste from chiller compressors and dairy facilities. Waste change material for transportation and distribution. Again, a significant impact as far as the increasing cold chain in the country is concerned. And energy storage in chilling centers. Variety of these technologies are getting implemented, and as I said, many of them first in the sector, first in the country, and some even first in the world. So it's in fact the current innovation challenge is right now open. If any of you are innovators or are aware of innovators who are looking at implementing pilot technologies on any of these verticals, do refer to the website that is mentioned below. There are several other platforms existing. There is a platform called Platform for Accelerating Clean Technology. Please register yourself in this website. The intention is to give a market access for cleaner technologies and make them available. And if you are end-use industry, please visit this. There are several innovative technologies which are listed, something which you could make use of in your operations. It is not only technologies within India, but there are also platforms which bring in several innovative technologies from other countries. Sweden, as we know, is the innovation is ranked first in the World Innovation Index. There are several innovative Swedish technologies which are brought in every year on variety of topics on energy efficiency. So in case you are interested in looking at any of these technologies, do refer to the website there on Innovations Accelerator. But some of these technologies are really giving a quantum jump as far as efficiency are concerned. Be it in terms of waste heat recovery systems or thermal technologies, energy storages, solar, variety of technologies which are giving very, very deep cuts as far as the energy consumption models are concerned. Apart from these innovations, there are also several new implementation models which are coming up. It could either be energy as a service. I mean, there are cooling and heating and IoT solutions today where it is not on sale, but on service model that technology suppliers are willing to partner with industry and implement these solutions. We have several equipment which are available on leasing or rental models to make the cash outflow significantly lesser for companies while they take advantage of the benefit right from day one. ESCO implementation, we all understand the kind of market opportunity for ESCOs. The PRSF and the PRGF schemes certainly add a fillip as far as the ESCO implementation in the country is concerned. And we have seen what demand aggregation can do with programs of EESL. So summing up, innovation we think is very critical for continued efficiency improvement. There is a need for tailored platforms to cater to this growing need from the industry. There are several innovative startups. I mean, variety of ideas and variety of technologies that they come up with. I think what they need is pilot, what they need is an acceptance, and what they need is scale up among the industry. But the reduction that they can bring in is quite deep and significant. The next area I wanted to speak about was on digital transformation. While the large industries have adopted digitization in their operations right from early days, there are several improvements that are still happening. For example, right now the latest trend is within the complicated PID loops that many of the large industries have, very innovative service providers have come in who can actually reduce the bandwidth of your control mechanism. How can they reduce the noise that they see in the control mechanism further? How can the standard deviation of your operations within the PID be trimmed? For example, as we see in the small schematic there, while your set point is a red line, the actual trend that you see in blue line can have a significant bandwidth. So how can we reduce this bandwidth to have a much more precise operation within the existing PID loop? So there are innovative solutions available for that. And if you're a small and medium enterprise who is just trying to make their first entry into automation, there are schemes available. For example, there is one transformation drive which exists which can help you record and monitor more than 85% of your energy consumption with a very, very nominal investment of just 2 lakhs per unit. So that is the kind of intervention that has been brought in. If you are interested in more details, please do let us know. But we think the digitalization can come at not as heavy a cost as it is anticipated. It is required, particularly in the current scenario where the the dependence on people can be reduced, the dependence on automation and the data and control systems can be enhanced further. I think this is the time we start looking at digitalization as the next big area to look at. And lastly, on energy efficiency financing. Financing is that big elephant in the room which has to fund all the other measures that we spoke about until now. The market opportunity for financing is big. If there is an energy efficiency company which is looking at a market anywhere in the world, I think India offers the best market for its investments. Investments are cutting across all sectors, be it agriculture, commercial, domestic, and the overall investment, even in a moderate case, is estimated to be around 8.5 lakh crores on energy efficiency alone by 2030. And the investment range also varies depending on the size of the unit and the kind of investment. But nevertheless, what it significantly talks about is the need for that kind of an investment. There are significant instruments which can be looked at this current point in time. Interest subvention scheme has been something which we've been discussing for quite some time, making loans available at a reduced cost for energy efficiency or clean tech products. This can be applicable for all sectors, large industries, MSMEs, commercials, but this can certainly accelerate the rate at which energy efficiency projects can be implemented and the overall attractiveness of the projects can be improved. Capital link credit subsidy again has been in existence for some time, but the identification of clean tech products or energy efficiency products is the need right now. How could we identify the technologies or the interventions that can bring in a deep reduction as far as energy efficiency measures are concerned? On-bill financing has been something which can significantly help the homeowners and the retail customers in a big way. How could this on-bill financing model be used to help procure energy efficient products at residences and other retail customers? And the partial risk guarantee facility on energy efficiency, the PRGF scheme, can certainly help upscale the ESCO implementation. The financing, we think, is the key stimulus that is required. Tailored financing schemes are required for adoption, and each of these measures that we discussed can have a different impact as far as energy efficiency implementation is concerned. And I think at this stage, I will stop because Hugo definitely would talk about the energy efficiency programs, but also has certain ideas on what kind of stimulus packages are currently looked at. So maybe I'll stop here and let Hugo share his presentation, and then I would be happy to answer any questions you may have. So Nisha, I can stop here and let Hugo continue.
Yes, thank you very much, Kiran. So I'll now hand this over to Hugo.
Let me know if this works. Are you able to see my screen?
I can see your screen. If you can just check moving a slide. Yes, it's perfect, Hugo. You can start. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kiran, for the very interesting presentation. So yes, as mentioned, I'm Hugo Salamanca, despite the change compared to the picture that was taken, pre-COVID lockdown in France. I wanted to thank the Confederation of Indian Industry for this major opportunity to share with you the current work the IEA has been doing, and in particular the work that we've been doing in the energy efficiency division with our E4 program, so energy efficiency in emerging economies, and more closely in the industry. So today I wanted to touch a few major issues. I might go fast a bit on certain slides, but very happy to come back in the discussion. This is for the sake of time constraint, but we'll be touching on the current trends on energy efficiency and energy use, the potential benefits from energy efficiency, and finally, what could policy packages look like for a quick recovery on the post-COVID-19 crisis. Finally, as was mentioned, benchmarking has appeared as one of the major tools that we have to improve energy efficiency, and I'll touch a bit on the initiative launched by Japan for their G20 presidency. So current trends. So the first indicator that we look at when tracking energy demand is energy demand growth. As we can see, energy demand has been rising since 2015 when we had the decade lowest energy demand growth due to China improvements in energy efficiency and low economic development in major economies such as Brazil. Nonetheless, we have seen a reverse trend since 2015 and 2018, so the peak in energy rise. So energy has been improving at a faster rate since 2015, with a reverse trend in 2019 due both to lower GDP growth and changes in climate, on which we'll touch a bit later. The second indicator that we track is energy intensity. I was mentioned energy intensity is the amount of GDP that is, the amount of GDP, of unit of GDP by energy use. So the lowest the energy intensity, the better. That means that we need less energy to produce GDP or economic development. As we can see, India has been one of the fastest improving countries in the globe, due to large policy coverage, as was mentioned, and a very extensive policy framework. On the other hand, we see that the United States in 2018 saw decreases in energy intensity improvement. So when looking at energy intensity, we take two major parameters. There are many, but we take two major parameters today. One will be the structure changes, and the second, weather. We'll be starting on how weather has impacted energy intensity, and we'll see then how structure changes might impact economic energy intensity. So 2019 saw a decrease in energy demand, as we saw, but however, if we take a look at normalization through weather, so if we compare the same weather with 2018, we see that there has been a flattening in energy intensity improvement. Indeed, 2019 compared to 2018 saw a warmer winter in North America, reducing heating demand, and saw a colder or a milder summer in Asia, lowering demand in air conditioning in China mainly. The second element that we look at when comparing energy intensity across years is the structural element. The structural element is how much GDP is produced through energy-intensive sectors. So energy-intensive sectors are iron and steel, pulp and paper, cement, etc. So more GDP is produced through those sectors, the higher the energy intensity. And as we can see, China production in iron and steel has been increasing in the last years, putting an upward pressure on energy intensity. So industry plays a major role in structural changes, among which major sectors such as the iron and steel sector in China and fertilizers in the United States. So overall,
Hugo, sorry to interrupt. Your voice seems to be a little low. Is it possible for you to maybe talk a little louder or maybe a little closer to the mic?
Yes, please let me check here on the parameters.
That's okay. If it is, if you don't see any issues, then please continue. It's okay.
Please let me know if this continue. I'll try to speak.
It's a lot better now. It's a lot better now. Yes, thanks.
Yes, so I was saying, so to sum up, energy demand has been growing. Energy intensity improvements have been slowing down, and this is due both to climate impacts, but also on structural changes. So this is what is represented in this next slide. So we see that structural changes have been lowering the improvement of energy intensity. So structural changes is moving from less energy intensive uses to more energy intensive uses, such as iron and steel for the industry. Switching away from services to iron and steel increases energy intensity. On the building sector, it's moving away from smaller house to bigger houses. In the transport, it's from public transportation to private owned cars. such. So rising living standards put an upward pressure in energy intensity. This is the main key message to remember. So there have been three major factors in reducing energy intensity improvements. The first one, as we said, is jump in industrial production from energy intensive sectors. The second one is overall structural changes. This is moving away from less energy intensive sectors to more energy intensive uses, again, due to rising living standards and economic development. And finally, we've seen a slowdown in policy engagement. Nonetheless, there is very positive elements to highlight. The fact that energy improvements in India since 2000 saved approximately 3.4 exajoules of additional energy use in 2018, which is equivalent to the total energy consumption of Spain. It's also saved around 300 million tons of CO2 equivalent, or the emissions of Turkey. And finally, this reduced oil imports in India by 8% and gas imports by 12%. Nonetheless, COVID has, as we know, had a critical impact on many sectors, among which the most heavily affected have been businesses, trade and public services, as well as manufacturing, where we can expect economic output to be heavily impacted, as mentioned by Kiran as well. This impact will, of course, be felt throughout 2020. And the current estimates for energy demand reductions are at 6% at the global scale. And as we can see, we are facing one of the highest energy demand decreases of the last 50 years in 2020. Key messages to remember: we have energy demand growth that had been rising until COVID, with energy efficiency improvements slowing down due to structural changes, but also to less policy engagement. Positive message still is that industry has been playing a major role in bringing energy saving benefits, as we see both in IEA countries and emerging economies. Industry energy efficiency savings have been the leading factor, representing more than 50% of savings. Energy efficiency can bring about many benefits, among which it can allow to play a significant role to achieve the sustainable development goals by 2050, where light industry, industrial electric motors, and heavy industry will play a major role. In order to determine what would be the potential benefits of energy efficiency, we have set with our colleagues from the WEO, the World Energy Outlook team, a model that takes into account what would the world be if all cost-effective measures were taken. So I'd like to stress this out. It means this model looks at what would happen if all cost-effective measures were taken by 2040. So it's current technologies and current policy. So it's all the tools that we have today. What would happen if we were to reach their maximum potential? So it's a very pragmatic approach and allows us to really have in mind what the potential of energy savings can be. Among the multiple benefits, I'd like to stress that there are 600 billion of USD savings to be made in energy expenditure for the industry. So this represents huge amounts of improvements in competitivity, large budget increases for economic development and strategic development. Of course, it also means for households to avoid energy spending, which allows to free purchasing power for basic needs such as health, transportation, education, and of course, economic development and consumption. Again, as we said, it also allows to reduce energy imports. We ran the model, the efficient world scenario model for China, and to estimate what the potential would be. And we see that there are major opportunities to be made in India with a potential 10 extra exajoules of additional energy efficiency, 10 exajoules of additional energy use that could be avoided through energy efficiency. This is approximately the consumption of France today. Industry plays again a major role in this, representing 45% of those savings. And finally, we would see 1 gigaton of CO2 emissions avoided by 2040, which is approximately half of India's current emissions. Nonetheless, current policies, so new policy scenario represent the current unstated policies. So what would happen if only the current policies that have been stated were implemented? We see that they do not cover the full potential of energy efficiency, as the shaded graph, part of the graph. So to highlight that major savings are still to be unlocked by policy and by investment. Investment would have to double from current trends by 2025, and will have to double again by 2040 if we want to reach the full potential of energy efficiency cost-effective measures. This, I have to highlight, is a major opportunity investment for businesses and industry. Indeed, energy efficiency is one of the most profitable investment that you can find on the market today. Just to give you the average figure is that for $1 invested in energy efficiency improvement, there will be $3 saved in energy consumption over the lifetime of the equipment. And as you can see in industry, in the electric motor-driven system line, this ratio rises to 7. So again, I'd like to stress this: $1 invested in improving energy efficiency in industrial electric motors-driven system will bring about $7 in energy saved over the lifetime of the equipment. So the investment that was mentioned before really represents a major opportunity for profits for businesses and, of course, for industry to improve their competitiveness. The major guidelines or major actions that can be taken in transport in order to achieve the major benefits, which would see doubling activity levels with the same amount of energy required. Most of the savings can be made in cars and trucks, so road transportation, and would require to improve the coverage of fuel efficiency standards for transportation, incentives to use more efficient vehicles, and of course to support more efficient modes. So this means for business that investing in long-term development of efficient vehicles will be key, especially in this new post-COVID era, where all countries will be looking to reduce consumption and expenses at all from all means. Again, transport is one of the major sources of savings, and fuel efficiency and improvements in efficiency levels is one of the key investment opportunities. In the building sector, we would see an increase in building surface of 60% by 2040 without additional energy use. Major savings in appliances, heating, cooling, and water heating represent the main savings, and the major policy to address those savings would be to, of course, address new buildings, but of course also touch on existing building stock. Also encourage consumption or purchase of more efficient appliances, and finally have a strong incentive and information scheme so as to guide consumers. So for businesses, this means that there will be a strong push, especially in India, where a very strong urbanization is expected in the next few years. There will be a huge demand for new materials, for more efficient material, for retrofits, and there are major, again, opportunities to invest in those sectors, as it will be key both in India but also in emerging economies, in particular sub-Saharan Africa, where urbanization is also expected to, was expected to rise to unprecedented levels before COVID. Finally, touching quickly on industry before focusing on it. So I'll keep this slide as we will be focusing on industry now. So again, to sum up what we have just mentioned, energy efficiency represents major opportunities. Just focusing on cost-effective solutions with the current policy, with current technologies. So this means what tools we have today at hand to make the most of energy efficiency savings and multiple benefits. So industry focus. Industry sector, as was mentioned just before, has been heavily affected by the COVID. And as we can see, manufacturing, I don't know if you see my mouse, I'm here highlighting the 9% decrease in world production from manufacturing sector is the most impacted one. But of course, industry, steel and cement, with reduction in construction, have also been affected and will be expected to take back up once lockdowns are eased in major economies. So heavy industries represent, of course, major efficiency savings. However, what our analysis shows is that most of the savings will be made in less energy-intensive sectors, such as textile, food and beverage, automobile, etc. They represent 70% of the savings. So again, there are savings to be made in heavy industry, of course, but most of the savings that have still to be unlocked are in less energy-intensive sectors. A quick zoom on India industry sector, where we carried out the composition analysis so as to evaluate how efficiency has been improving. We see that recent trends since 2010 have showed major savings of technical efficiency in India, allowing to offset part of the activity increases in. Again, we see how India has been able to multiply its energy efficiency improvements in the last 10 years with a very extensive and efficient policy framework, on which we'll dig into a bit later now. So what would the policy package look like? So as we know, governments will be looking at really a short-term recovery policy package, and energy efficiency, I have to highlight once again, is one of the few resources that all countries have at hand, and in particular emerging economies. So they are able to bring about, as we mentioned, major amounts of profits for investment, job development, economic and strategic also development, and they should be considered in all stimulus packages as a major resource. At the IEA, we truly believe that there are three major pillars on which this policy package should be. The first pillar is a regulatory dimension. So we need a strong push by government to promote energy efficiency and to impose energy efficiency in all agendas. This can be done through mandatory targets and in order to touch all sectors, energy management systems can help address that. The second pillar is benchmarking, and as Kiran very eloquently mentioned, they are a major tool in order to not only share best practices, but be able to set adequate targets and be able to really determine the saving potentials and the potential benefits. And finally, there should be incentives so as to create a market development for energy efficiency. So these three pillars should be, of course, relying on development of training and the necessary skills. As we mentioned, bulk procurement can also help lower the cost of basic technologies, and government support will be required in the post-COVID-19 crisis, as all sectors, in particular in the industry, might face financial limitations. So we are facing today with a key opportunity that this unfortunate crisis also bring about, that is to reorient investment, reorient the production, and also to invest in the most efficient processes and tools that we have. As mentioned, less energy intensive sectors will play a key role as they represent among the major sources of saving potentials. They also represent a number of significant number of jobs and opportunities for export. Finally, I wanted to focus on the PAT scheme, even though I'm sure most of you are very familiar with it, just to highlight that the Perform, Achieve and Trade scheme is considered by the IEA as one of the most well-designed policy framework that is currently applied in the industry. Indeed, it has all the elements that we have just mentioned. It has a mandatory target by subsector of energy savings. It has also a market push for white certificates to be exchanged for the sectors that are overperforming. And finally, it has a very well structured indicator tracking system, which every cycle being updated and setting new targets. So we have through the PAT scheme a perfectly designed policy tool, and that has brought significant results in terms of energy savings. So just to highlight that this is a very good way forward, a very good framework, and should be encouraged and is used as an example by our team when discussing with all our partners. However, to give other examples, supporting energy management systems, again, that are able to address all major sectors. So I won't go into all the examples, but just to highlight Portugal, SGCIE example, we see that from this mandatory policy for SMEs and less energy intensive sectors to have an energy management system, not necessarily an ISO 50001 certified management system, just energy management system. We see that on average, there were 6% of total energy use reduction and 8% of energy cost. These are major resources for increase in competitivity, increases in competitivity, and of course economic development. I have listed other examples for your information. We can come back to them at a later stage. One of the short-term steps that we could highlight in terms of energy efficiency is the importance of electric motors. As mentioned, one of the most cost-effective measures is the investment in electric motor-driven systems, and there is still a huge potential to be unlocked, as we see that the actual coverage does not address most of energy use from electric motors, and that it is nonetheless a very widely used policy. Here I wanted to also highlight the very good work that EESL has been doing on electric motors based on the Ujala case study and very successful example addressing bulk procurement for electric motors. This will allow a new manufacturing sector to be developed and also exports to be made. For example, in Brazil and Mexico, where MAPs are in place, there is also large manufacturing of electric motors, and these countries are able to export their technology to the American continent. So again, bulk procurement and electric motors are a major resource, both for energy savings, but also for economic development. as increasing the demand for electric motors will also justify a market to be created, and then technology to be exported to other countries. Of course, to highlight that energy savings is not the only benefit from energy efficiency, I would like to recommend this publication on the multiple benefits of energy efficiency, where we can dig more into details of examples where there were also quantification of savings in terms of waste material, improvements in maintenance costs, operation as well, and of course improvement of working conditions. When taking into account the multiple benefits of energy efficiency, hugely reduce the return of investment. So in these current times, it is extremely important to have in mind that energy efficiency has multiple benefits, competitivity, increases in public budgets. It also allows maintenance costs to be reduced, waste to be lowered, and conditions to be improved, environmental working conditions to be improved. One last point on the multiple benefits to address is that there are currently fuel subsidies in major emerging economies, and due to COVID recovery plans or impacts on public finance, these fuel subsidies might be revised. In order to protect the industry from such changes, energy efficiency will of course be essential if energy subsidies were to be reduced. As an indication, in India, 1% of the GDP is used to subsidize fuel. Finally, I wanted to touch on the work that we have been carrying out under the initiative of Japan for the G20 presidency on benchmarking. So this work has started by addressing the 5 energy-intensive sectors that are iron and steel, cement, pulp and paper, aluminium, and petrochemicals. The purpose is really to be able to share best practices, to identify the saving potentials, and to set adequate targets. For the sake of time, I will only focus on iron and steel work, but keep in mind that we are also working on the other 4 sectors. Also to highlight is that we will be extending this work to the less energy-intensive sectors. As we mentioned, they represent major saving potentials and economic development opportunities, such as the textile industry, food and beverage, and automotive. So just to give you a quick overview of this work, this is pretty much what it can produce if we are able to gather the adequate data. So we would be able to see which countries are able to share best practices, what policies might have had positive impacts. Also compare best available technologies performance to current performance, and set the adequate targets. So for iron and steel, as Kiran was mentioned, there are international risk data available, and also IEA balances. We are still facing some challenges in boundary definition, so to be able to compare countries on the same basis, and we are struggling as well to gather data. So support on this work will be essential. Again, this is a major opportunity for international cooperation to exchange best practices, to set adequate targets, and be able to seize all the major benefits from energy efficiency. So I might have been a bit fast, I apologize. So coming back on the main and key messages. So what we have seen in recent years is an increase in energy demand, albeit 2019 being a bit maybe different. We will have to wait for next year to see if this tendency is confirmed. Otherwise, we have seen energy demand grow at an increased rate and energy improvements slow down. As we saw, we estimate that this is due to structural changes in the improvement of economic development and also to weather changes. Of course, it's a bit soon now to estimate the impact of COVID, but the 2008 crisis saw a reduction in energy intensity before seeing a peak in energy demand and a lowering of energy intensity. So we have to be careful in this recovery step to ensure that we direct investment in the right track, that we seize all the benefits from the start through this economic stimulus. The industry sector will play a major role in this, as most of the savings, as we saw, will be in the industry in India, and it's a very profitable sector. Again, as we see, the benefits from energy efficiency improvements are vast and should be quantified as much as possible to really make a case for energy efficiency wherever possible in order to make the best investment at these times of financing constraints. Again, there is job creation potential, there is economic and strategic development potential through the development of new manufacturing sectors, such as electric motors. There is also gains in competitivity, reducing energy costs and energy bill for the industry, and as well it will protect the industry from fuel subsidies policies changes. And finally, I wanted to highlight, as Kiran very well mentioned, that international cooperation is key in such times, and benchmarking programs and work are a very good way forward to be able to share good practices. And the IEA is, of course, very happy to connect with our member countries to share policies and share experience when designing our next steps. I'll stop here and leave time for questions. And I apologize if the sound was not that good and if I was a bit too fast.
Thank you very much, Hugo, for that interesting and insightful presentation. There are some questions both for Hugo and for Kiran.